This is Father Jacob Bertrand Janczyk.
And this is Father Gregory Pine.
Welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks to all of those who support us. If you enjoy the show, please consider making a monthly donation on Patreon. Be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to your podcasts. Father Gregory, here we are, recording yet another Godsplaining episode. What a blessing to be together. How are you?
It is a blessing to be together. I'm doing well. Let's see, cool things in Switzerland. I recently went, well, this isn't in Switzerland. I recently went up to the Netherlands to visit with the Dominican Sisters of Saint Cecilia, who are assigned in Sittard, and who do a lot of things apostolically. But one of those things is they run the chaplaincy of the University of Maastricht, the Catholic chaplaincy. So I went up there to visit with them and then to visit with their students, and we had a retreat day. And it was great. Just a lot of really cool people coming from a lot of different places. So, some people have, been practicing Catholics their whole life and are very serious about their ongoing conversion. And then other people who just started coming back to Mass like a week previously and are kind of, overwhelmed by all of the things that they're experiencing, but convicted that they're good. So it was really beautiful just to be with them, to chat with them. And glad to have opportunities. On the way home, I had 7 train transfers, one of which involved a bus and another which involved a cancellation. So that was a blessing because nothing like a little ministry followed by a little bit of transportation punishment. So, doing well. How are you?
I would never. There's not enough money in the world. Like, I won't even take one layover on a flight. Never mind. That makes me like sick, actually. Like the thought of that. Gosh. But you also travel with like a homeless person, just a knapsack. What are those things called? Like a handkerchief on a stick kind of thing.
Oh, I know.
You bundle it all up. Whereas I travel with 42 trunks. So
yeah.
Well, okay, all right, 40. But gosh, 7 transfers. Oh my.
You're like a 19th century Regency lord, You're like, Derek, did you bring the last trunk?
Kind of. Yeah, that's how I talk. Exactly. But no, you don't talk to the people who move your trunks. So why would I talk to Derek? Gosh. I was going to say something, but now I've been so distracted by the crippling despair of thinking about you doing that. Yeah. Anyways, I think you asked what I was doing, and currently I'm in a mountain of paperwork for applications, I think.
Nice.
I was kind of imagining how I would describe that. And if you thought of Scrooge McDuck, who dives into his pool of money and swims in it, that's kind of my office right now with papers, just kind of floating. And then I worried, so this is wholly unrelated to anything, but you asked, so I'm going to say sometimes my office leaks, it's an old building that we live in, and that happens from time to time. And so there are times when I'm falling asleep and I think oh no, what if it leaks and all the papers get ruined? And then these are the weird kind of musings of a vocation director at the Dominican Society. So that's what's going on. It's really exciting. So, yeah, but there you have it. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're actually here to talk about another Dominican. You might not know that he is, but he is Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. He's not a first order Dominican. He's not a friar, but he is a third order Dominican. I guess what would you say was? I mean, we make vows until death. And I think we're Dominicans in heaven. So I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, I'd say is. I mean, remember that image that was commissioned for the 800th anniversary of the order? What was the woman's name? Bernadette Carstensen. And I think Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati is pictured in his heavenly glory wearing a habit. So according to...
Wearing a habit?
Wearing a kind of habit. So, which was a custom of the Third Order, I think, prior to the Second Vatican Council, is that you would be buried in the habit. So insofar as her artistic insight communicates something of the truth, he is a Dominican in heaven, or at the very least, he didn't get new clothes.
Yeah. If you look on as I have in front of me currently, because I wanted to know his birth and death dates, if you look on the Wikipedia page for Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati, also, if you want to know where we get most of our information for the podcast, it's Wikipedia. Spoiler alert. But he has, Dominicans have OP after their name. On the website, on Wikipedia, it's TOSD Third Order of Saint Dominic. It's like
Oh, wow.
I didn't know they ever did that because I knew Third Order members used to put TOP, Third Order Dominicans, and now generally just put OP. But anyways, for those who don't know, Pier Giorgio was born 1901, died in 24. He was 24 years old, so died in 1925. From Turin, from Italy, and yeah, I guess we're going to talk about him a little bit. So, Father Gregory, you tell us about him. Why we're talking about him now? Tell us about him, Frassati.
Yeah. When we were chatting through options for how best to highlight his sanctity and certainly to highlight his sanctity as a model for our own growth and holiness, I think it's helpful just to kind of break it out in terms of his virtues or his excellences, because he's a bridge builder, and the saints are all bridge builders in the sense that they open up for us the life of heaven. They show what it means to be like the Lord Jesus Christ, but in a way that's approachable, in a way that's imitable. And I think that Pier Giorgio Frassati is very inspiring for that reason, because he's very human, right? He's very imitable, but he lived his humanity in a way that was like transparent to the working of the grace of God. So yeah, I mean, there's just lots of human stories, but also lots of stories which, yeah, kind of call you up or call you into the divine mysteries. The first one that I was thinking about is, I mean, Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati was kind of a brawler. I mean, he was a guy who was ready to fight. So there's a kind of tenacity there. There's a kind of a fighting spirit, and you can see this on natural and kind of supernatural planes. But the one story that I was thinking about is, I think his family was out in their country home in Polone, which I actually visited one time when I was a student at Steubenville. We did the semester abroad in Austria, took trips on the weekends, and one weekend we went to Turin and Polone, and you could stay in the basement of his family's summer home, which is really beautiful. But because his father was the editor of a newspaper which had political affiliations, sometimes they would get flack from political adversaries. And one day there were a couple of fascists that broke into their family home. And Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati just met him in the foyer and then fought them off. So outmanned, outgunned, potentially overpowered, in no way dismayed. He just fought fascists out of his family's foyer, because sometimes you got to fight a fascist.
It's awesome. All in a day's
Yep.
work.
Indeed. But I don't know. You have other favorite things? Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati's fighting spirit.
Yeah, I don't know if I knew of Pier Giorgio before entering the order, but maybe I did. I can't remember the exact details of that timeline. But I certainly know that I became well acquainted with him in the novitiate, and that he was somebody. His sister wrote a couple books on him, and I read those in the novitiate and sort of developed a devotion to Pier Giorgio. Then one of the things that kind of, I guess initially caught my attention on Pier Giorgio, and maybe because it's like reading about him is not kind of it's much more, I don't know, I don't like relatable in ways, because he's a 20th century person. So like he's much more contemporary as opposed to saints who had lived centuries ago and that sort of thing. So you can, and he died when he was 24 and I was 22 in the novitiate. So and I guess whatever, 22, kind of a relatability, especially to his kind of like his friendships and his sort of outdoors kind of love for the outdoors, for climbing, for skiing. A lot of the pictures you see of him, he's like on the side of a rock face, or like on a mountain with a pipe, or like with his friends wearing a stupid hat, like drinking, like paper hat, like drinking beer. And there's just like a sort of humanity to him that's I guess readily accessible. That's not so much like a fighting spirit thing, but you can sort of, I don't know, make a similar kind of observations and insights into the man and into who he was, and and all of that. And I think that sort of, I guess, a fighting spirit, in as much as like a sort of passion and zeal for life, fighting off fascists and living with his friends and sharing his life with them. But that also turns into not turns into, but also included his love for the poor, and his his service to the poor. And like, what I guess one of the things here that stands out in my mind is that he died very quickly. Pier Giorgio was only sick for a few days of a type of polio. Is that right? Am I remembering that correct? Like poliomyelitis.
Mm-hmm.
Is that? Yeah. Oh, good memory. Yay me. Good job. And like his family wasn't aware of the way by which he served other people, gave to other people until like his funeral. There's this picture I know in one of the books that his sister wrote of like him being carried in his casket down the road, just like swarmed by like mobs of people who came out to mourn his death. And it was the first time his family knew of his sort of like influence and role in people's lives throughout the city of Turin, which is a pretty incredible reality. I mean, on one hand, it shows like, yeah, right, this like tenacity, this zeal, this ready to fight kind of characteristic, but also one that's like tempered in virtuous ways by humility and self-sacrifice. So I think that's all of a piece. Yeah, I think that's all of a piece.
Yeah, when thinking about his model and witness, in a certain sense, it's a specific model for the early 20th century in Italy because he's very much involved in his political context. But I think it also helps us, 21st century America, or wherever you're listening to this episode, because he breaks out of ready-made categories. He's not just like um, an easily identifiable trope, right? He's not just like what you would call a traditional Catholic or a conservative Catholic or a liberal Catholic or a blah, 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 thus and such Catholic. I mean, he believed, right? So he's orthodox insofar as he takes the revelation and grace of our Lord Jesus Christ very seriously. But then he just permitted that to transform his humanity. And so you see this in a variety of registers, or you see this in just different aspects of his life. So he's he's very politically involved. And I think a lot of us, like, political involvement kind of has an unhealthy savor to it. It's like, but he knew that the common good depended upon it. And certainly during the years of and immediately following the First World War, it was necessary, right, to fight for your patrimony. There's this famous quote of his. I think it's in one of his letters, or maybe it's one of the addresses that he gave to one of the political societies that he was a member of. But he says something like, "To live without faith, without a patrimony, or without a patrimony to defend, without a steady struggle for truth, that is not living but existing." And so he got in there. Like, he was influential in founding the Italian Popular Party. He was very much involved in the St. Vincent de Paul Society, which at that time was more politically active than at present, kind of like downstream of its founding by a gentleman whose name I think was Frederick Ozanam. And then also, like, I mean, he was in a lot of political manifestations. He was arrested multiple times for precisely this reason. But then on the other hand, like you said, he is constantly present to and of service to the material poor. So the stories that you hear about that they're wild. They're great. They're just super touching. His family was very rich. We talked about his dad. And so whenever he had ready money, which was often, he would give it away. And even when he was given a big gift or the offer of a big gift from his family, he would often sell it so that he could take care of his poor. And he just had a running list of people in Turin whom he saw to their needs. He was the one who was the go-between. And it's often thought, I think, that he would have contracted polio from one of the people whom he served. So he's in it to win it, but in every imaginable register, which I think makes him such a light for the 21st century, where we are somewhat more tempted to fall into tropes, be they good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah, yeah. One of the I think it's also the books that his sister wrote on him have a lot of like family pictures and yeah, just photos of things from his life. And on when he was so Pier Giorgio, he started to feel sick on one day, and within the course of a week, right, he died within 6 days of like his first kind of illness. And I think his one of the books that Luciano Frassati is his sister who wrote, right, yeah, who wrote
Yep.
the book. One of them is his last days, which just recounts like the last week of his life. And I think it's in this book. There's a photo of a letter. It's just real, not a letter. It's not a letter. It's a note, like a really short note of an instruction. If he was supposed to pick up or get medicine to somebody, one of these people that he was on his list, and even on his deathbed, as he's like dying from polio within like the span of less than a week, this is like on his mind that he scratches out this barely legible note of like someone to deliver who is expecting some like medicine or something. So this is like until his last moments, his life was not lived for him, which is weird to think of, like a 24-year-old living that way. Because we look around I mean, not to just if you're 24, I'm sorry, I'm not just making fun of you, but like, or like a 34-year-old, I'm 34, and most of my life centers around thoughts of like, what do I want and what's good for me. um but this like this desire to give, and I think this is kind of the like a connection between those characteristics of like the tenacity, the ready to fight, but also like the service. It's like he was a man who lived a Christ-like charity, like totally oriented towards another, which, as Father Gregory was saying, does not put you in a box. It doesn't leave a man or woman sort of contained to a caricature, but allows for like the freedom to live as a disciple, and which is, how Pier Giorgio lived. So it's just striking to have those kind of witnesses in such a young man who died not 100 years ago, just kind of like ready at hand.
Yeah. And another thing that I love about that too is that it's just very simple and straightforward. I think a lot of it, we spend a lot of time agonizing or anguishing over how best to serve or what best to do, but we don't necessarily get about the business of doing it. Whereas it seems to me that just the opposite is the case with Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. Not that he didn't have thoughts in his head, because he had plenty of thoughts in his head, but he was a man of action, in the sense that he recognized that the gospel had a claim on his life, and it drew him out of himself into these acts of service that we described. So, like for instance, when he was thinking about his vocation, he thought about the priesthood, but he said, "I want to become a mining engineer because I can do the most good in the mines." It was just like a very simple recognition. This is a big industry in the north, and I want to be present to the people, so I'm going to study the things that I need to study in order I can have the conversation and be present too. Just like boom. And I think he was one exam short of obtaining his degree from the Polytechnic University in Turin, which degree was later granted posthumously. But yeah, there's no, he's just thinking like, I want to serve people. This is a place where I can serve people best. So I'm just going to do it. And yeah, there's something about that approach which I think is very estimable. There's no prerequisites to living the gospel, right? Grace creates the conditions for its reception and for its use. So when you got it, you use it. So it's not as if there are stages before you become a Christian where you need to take the necessary steps in order to, well, no, it's just, like Christ is making this gift available in your life, seize upon it, and then be about your business. And I think that Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati is a real light when it comes to that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think in different ways so far we've talked about is like ways by which he loved his charity, whether that be for the poor, for his friends, for sort of bigger kind of dreams of like service, and more generally like with his desire to be an engineer, these kind of things. But especially his last kind of days, there are a number of people in his life that kind of highlight his like, I don't know, like readiness to love, the way by which he loved. I think of the girl that he loved, Laura, his family, his parents, the circumstances of his death, around the death of his grandmother. You want to talk about some of that
Yeah.
more specifically?
Yeah. No, I think when we talk about charity, we're talking about an ordering of loves. So it's not just a matter of loving everything always at the highest or at the utmost degree, but it's a matter of loving the things as they ought to be loved. And you see in him, obviously, a great love of God, but it's present throughout his relationships. And so his parents' relationship was stressed, and certainly he suffered from that, but he remained, like loving and obedient to them. Like you mentioned, he fell in love with this young woman, Laura Hidalgo. She was part of the group of friends that would often go to the mountains together for these alpinist trips. But when he made that known to his family, they said no, and that was that, right? And he was obedient, which is kind of strange for a 21st century audience, but you can see in it a kind of deference and love, a respect for his parents. And then like his piety is also awesome insofar as it does betray like a great love. You hear some cool stories like he was praying before the altar, hot wax started dripping from a candle onto him and he didn't even notice because he was so wrapped in attention. Or I think also of the pilgrimages that he made up to that mountaintop near the family home in Polone. I think it's like Our Lady of Oropa. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong / biffing it, but whatever. But he loved to make these pilgrimages, and he liked to do them early in the morning so he could get about his work for the rest of the day. And so he would like tie a string to his hand or to his finger and then drop it out his second story window. And then the gardener would, when he'd show up for work in the morning, he'd just pull on it. That was his alarm clock. So that way he could be up and about his pilgrimage, hiking to the top of this mountain sanctuary and, showing his affection, showing his love for the Blessed Virgin Mary. So yeah, there's just so much testimony to the fact that here was a man who loved, right? Like you said, he loved this woman, he loved his parents, he loved his family, he loved his friends, he loved the poor to whom he was sent. And there's a kind of grandeur to it, insofar as his heart was made very capacious for all those to whom he was sent. yeah, I don't know if you got other stories or ever other things about him that you love in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, the when I first read his biography, one of the things that was I was like what are you doing? Uh kind of moments was when he first started to feel sick. When he first started to feel sick, like body aches, fever, that sort of thing. One of the first or second days that kind of hit him, his grandmother passed. I believe it was his maternal grandmother? I don't remember. I think
I
it
don't
was,
remember
right?
either.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, his grandmother had passed, so he had complained about being sick. It was kind of brushed off as sort of, well, like, you're sick, but like, she just died, so we have, like, there's a funeral to plan and like those kind of things, which is like, if you don't think it's a serious illness, it's like, yeah, I mean, perhaps that's like a normal reaction. But even as his sickness grew and intensified in the coming days, he didn't insist, like he didn't push himself in and that sort of thing. Maybe it was just, again, thought that like, oh, I'm not feeling well, I'll feel better. So there wasn't like an urgency to like, I'm dying type thing, which wasn't recognized at first. Um, yeah, at least in my mind, I always thought that like, in first reading about it and thinking about it, that like, well, why didn't you say anything? And then I think of all, like, every kind of like 24-year-old when he's sick, like like nobody goes to the doctor, right? It's like, oh, I'll see how I feel in a week, and then it's like, I'm still feeling crappy. It's like, no, I'm feeling better, like the whole sort of back and forth. So you can understand kind of the how that's like a natural kind of thing, and then the illness came very quickly. But um and kind of thinking about the humility there, and yeah, I don't want to over spiritualize this sort of like, people didn't seek medical attention because they didn't think it was a serious kind of illness. I'm not saying that that was somehow some sort of miraculous kind of whatever, but you can see the virtue at work of, of charity, of trying to mourn the death of his grandmother and give, like, do that with his family and do that well, and also like just kind of, yeah, not make things about him. I don't know, I'm a millennial, I think, right? I never remember these years. I'm a millennial, and there's, I think, a temptation, uh, or there's kind of, maybe it's a caricature of millennials, but it's sort of, we are the center of the universe type thing, and you don't get that with Pier Giorgio, and I think it's especially highlighted in these, in the circumstances of his illness and death, and the death of his grandmother, and the mourning of the family. And it kind of, I think it strikes me, or it struck me a little more like on the nose, because my disposition was to like prefer myself. Like, I need attention, I need to be helped, I need to be cared for. And it's like, well, that's not always at the heart of charity. It's not at the heart of charity. In fact, yeah, I mean, that's of course not to say that like we shouldn't care for our bodies and health and stuff, and obviously we should. But there, the way by which this love is expressed is in Pier Giorgio, is, it's like, it's so, um like uncomplicated and just like in your face, that it's like, whoa, each time you read about it, whether it's like with the poor, with Laura, with his parents, with his death, with his grandma, each time it's just like you're just kind of like slapped by, like, there's just no pretense, there's no pretense around it, it seems. And he, I think, in many ways serves as a great example of that reality. Yeah, for us to sort of imitate, and for him to intercede for us, for that imitation, that conformity to Christ.
boom. Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, you're just going to have to say the man has all the virtues, because all Christians by their baptism have all the virtues. And I think Pope John Paul II, or Pope Saint John Paul II, highlights that in the homily that he gave on the occasion of his beatification, saying that this was a man of the Beatitudes, which is to say, like, this is a man on whom the Spirit of Christ rests, and in whom it is abundantly and evidently active. But I think, maybe just to return to the point from earlier, the fact that he builds a bridge between our lives and the life of heaven. There's something about Pier Giorgio which is so imitable, or that's like so lovable on account of the fact that it's so real, or that it's so gritty. Because I just I love the fact that he's just a dude, right? He's an absolute dude. He's kind of a bro. And there are many, I don't know what you would call them, but there are many peculiarities of his life which just bear that out. So for one, I love this because you'll know why I love this. He loved singing, but he was not a good singer. And he wanted to, like, lend his voice to the praise of God, but he also knew that it was a major distraction. So this one parish church where he would go often for daily mass in Turin, called the Consolata, he would just kind of tuck himself in a back corner, just just bawl out the songs, because it's like, Jesus. And it was just, apparently it was terrible. But he just couldn't be stopped because his disposition was, Lord, you gave me a voice. I'm going to give it back. And here we go. The correction that I received most frequently in the novitiate was for singing in public. Father Jacob Bertrand can testify. So this for me is a great light insofar as it permits me to continue in my imperfection without any penitence.
Yeah, it wasn't just the novitiate that you've been corrected on singing in public. So let the record show that when I entered this recording studio, Father Gregory was singing. I'm gonna call you out, but that's all right.
It's done. It's better.
Yeah, his I mentioned to the photo of him with his friends, like they had like stupid paper hats on and like beer steins in their hands. And what was the name of there was a group, but right?
I think it's, I don't know again how to pronounce anything in Italian, but like the TP Lowski, which is like the Shady Characters Club.
Yeah.
And they had all names of revolutionaries, like Robespierre, for instance, was I think his tag name. So these guys, they're bros. They're hilarious.
Yeah. Also, I guess I mentioned at the beginning his being a third order Dominican, so he joined the order of preachers by becoming like a lay member. Took the religious name he never went by, but took the religious name of Savonarola, Girolamo Savonarola, who was, oh gosh, if you're looking for a spicy Dominican character, read up on him. He was he was Dominican friar in Florence during the Medici reign and was burned at the stake for being a heretic, but then after his death was not a heretic anymore, was kind of there's a better word
vindicated
for that,
whatever you call it.
But like the bonfire of the vanities and all that's all around Savonarola, and that's the name that Pier Giorgio took when he entered when he became a Dominican. So that's also it's I'm sure there's devotion there, but I also would imagine there's some that's not accidental that he took the name of such a character. So I think that also kind of just highlights this sort of rowdy, like whatever shady characters club of Pier Giorgio Frassati. So there you have it. Father Gregory, we have a couple minutes left. Any final thoughts, offerings, ruminations, meditations?
Last thought would be, I take great joy in the fact that Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati loved the mountains. Because I think that sometimes when we think about our Christian lives, we think about them in a kind of dour way, like, oh man, I'm baptized. I got to give praise and glory to God. I got to save souls. So maybe that means that I should spend every waking hour either on my knees or in direct service to the material poor. But Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati is often in the mountains. And it's hilarious too, because you read his letters, which were published by like St. Paul's Press a few years back, several years back. And you'll read a letter from like, July 4th. It's like, man, I got to really buckle down and finish this last exam. It's in a few days and I gotta really get after it. And then the next day there's another letter. It's like, hey, I decided to go to the mountains for a 2-day hiking trip. So totally pumped. You should come with me. And it's no surprise that he failed quite a number of exams and had to repeat them. But he's always up in the mountains. There's a picture of him, mountaineering that's very famous, what he wrote on the words verso l'alto, to the heights or to the top. And on his door, apparently he just wrote the words mountains, mountains, mountains. And one of the more beautiful quotes from him about this particular theme is one that I return to with some frequency. He says, every day that passes, I fall more desperately in love with the mountains. I'm ever more determined to climb the mountains, to scale the mighty peaks, to feel that pure joy which can only be felt in the mountains. So, as Father Timothy Danaher often says, you're either a mountain person or a beach person, but whatever kind of person you are, there's something beautiful about God's creation, that second book in which we learn of him, in which we are restored and refreshed, especially in a time where it's super easy just to like get immersed in your work or get immersed in your desk or what would you say in your computer, or these, that, and the other things. So, Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati shows us a way out of that and up into the glory of God, which I love very much.
There you have it. Well, it's in the States. I guess we don't really celebrate his feast day very much because it falls on July 4th. And instead we have masses where we sing like America the Beautiful and that sort of thing. But if you're looking for his feast day, it is the 4th of July. Easy to remember enough. So if you want to learn more about Pier Giorgio. They're the two books that I mentioned by his sister Luciana. One is called A Man of the Beatitudes, which is from John Paul II's homily, as Father Gregory mentioned. The other is called My Brother Pier Giorgio, His Last Days. So that's about the last week of his life. Man of the Beatitudes is about his whole life, but both really, really excellent reads. So check that out. Yeah, there you go. Pier Giorgio Frassati. I was trying to think if I had like a nice thing about mountain stuff, but I I guess I don't. You kind of summed it up. So that's all we have. So thanks again to all of our supporters. If you'd like to help out with the work of Godsplaining, check us out at patreon.com/Godsplaining. Thanks to all of you who already do. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, like, subscribe, leave a 5-star review. These all help us out very much, even though they seem pretty simple. It's how it works. So thanks for that. Visit godsplaining.org to shop our merchandise and to get dates and information for our upcoming Godsplaining events. As we've mentioned, we have 3 retreats coming up, 2 in July, 1 in August. Check them out on the website if you're looking to get a little spiritual nourishment over the summer. Want to come out to a Godsplaining event? We'd love to have you. Spaces are filling up and limited, so check that out. And as always, thanks for your prayers. Know that we are praying for you. And until next time, God bless.